Hey guys, welcome to our service. I'm so glad that you're tuning in today. If you didn't know, Church on the Move is a family of churches. We have 3 locations across Northeast Oklahoma. So if you live near one of our locations, come out and join us in person. We have incredible worship and teaching, and of course, amazing environments for kids and students that we want you and your family to experience for yourselves. If you have questions, you can drop a comment below or visit churchonthemove.com for more info. Now enjoy the service.
So look, this is the Summer of Psalms. Is that right, Pastor? So I'm going to preach from Psalms chapter 7 today, and I'm going to draw from the first verse, and I'm going to tell some stories today that will help explain some of the other things we've just said. But I love this verse. It says, "O Lord my God, in you I put my trust. Save me from all those who persecute me and deliver me." I love it that he says, "In you I put my trust." And we're going to talk today about trusting God. I mean, really, truly, deeply, wholeheartedly, fully trusting God. So if I took a survey and I had everybody pull out a secret ballot and say, "Do you trust God?" almost everybody would say yes. A few would say maybe, but hardly no one would say no. But I think really most of us want to trust God. We think it's the right thing to trust God, but it's very difficult to trust God because for most of us, it's very difficult to know what God really wants us to do or what he's saying to us. And so I love this verse in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths." So when I say I trust God, what does that really mean? Look, I have 2 major themes that go through all of my messages of my life. Number 1 is knowing God's will for your life. You must know God's will for your life. You personally must know God's will for your life. If you don't know God's will for your life, I want to tell you how to find out. How many want to know? Okay, that was enough right there, the guy in the front. Look, here's how you know God's will for your life. Number 1, turn off the noise in your life. Turn off the radio, turn off the TV, turn off the internet, turn off the games, turn off sports, turn everything off. Well, there's so much noise in our life. God usually speaks in a still, small voice, and he's drowned it out by all the noise in our life. Turn off the noise. Go someplace. Sit down. Be quiet before the Lord. Prayer basically consists of 2 things. 1, we know very well, you talk to God. Number 2, he talks to you. And look, you can't hear him talk if you're yapping away. So go someplace, sit down, set aside an hour, 2 hours, a half a day, go to the park, take your wife, go sit on the lake, on a bench around the lake someplace. Go someplace, just be quiet, and you will hear from God. When people say, "I can't hear from God," almost every time when I really talk to them, they just are not getting themselves in a position to hear from God. So number 1 theme is knowing God's will for your life. Number 2 is doing God's will for your life. I think because we don't know God's will, we can't trust God to do God's will. So you have to know his will, and then you have to learn how to trust him. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions today. The first one is this: can you trust God? So look, I have a tattoo right here in my arm, and it says, "I trust God." You know why? Not because it's a statement of my faith. It's because I need to see that and ask myself, am I really trusting God? When something happens, can I trust God that that was the right thing to happen? When your best friend's killed in a motorcycle accident by a wrong-way driver, can you trust God and know the right thing is going to come out of that? Look, that was brutal. It happened 5.5 years ago. I had to trust God through that. I thought I knew God's will for his life. I thought I knew what was going to happen. He thought he knew what was going to happen. Our wives are best friends. They thought they knew what was going to happen. But look, God, something different happened. And I'm not preaching the theology on that. All I know is I had to say, you know what, God? I trust you. And you see, we think that if we start trying to learn how to trust God and depend on God and do what God says, that we have to trust our common sense. You know, like when I say, you trust God? Will you trust God if he told you to move to India like he told my family? You know, one day, I was in my office at our home church that we helped plant in 1980. God started speaking to me. I called my wife and said, "Is God speaking to you today?" She said, "No, I'm mopping the floor." I said, well, look, God's speaking to me. She said, well, what's he say? And I said, no, you have to hear this on your own. It's a big deal. Go pray. 15 minutes later, she called me back in the office. I said, did you hear from God? You know what she said? No, I don't need to hear from God. You're my man of God. Come home and tell me what God said. Wow, now that'll make your heart pat. I went home and said, Sherry, we're moving to India. She said, what? I said, yeah, we're moving to India. She said, Jack, you went to India one time and said you wouldn't go back for 20 years. You said it's the toughest place in the earth. You said it's impossible to raise a family there. I said, I know, but we're going to go to India. She said, why? I said, 2 reasons. Number 1, if we go to India where it's the darkest, our light will shine the brightest. Number 2, if we go to India where it's very difficult, everything else will be a piece of cake. You know what she did? She looked at me and she said, okay, you tell me what day and I'll have the girls and I packed up and the house closed down and we'll be ready to go. January 3rd of 1985, we boarded an airplane and we flew to India, and the rest is history. You know why? Because we don't look back. We trust God. So my question there is, can you really trust God? If God told you to move to India, could you just say yes? Well, I need a little confirmation. No, you don't. You just need to hear from God. You know, when I say, people say, well, you know, you have to use common sense. No, you don't. You have to use uncommon sense. Other people don't understand it. Her grandmother, great Christian Sunday school teaching lady, was like, why do you have to go to India? We got a lot of heathen right here in the United States. I was like, you're right, Granny. There are a lot of heathen here, but that's your job. You take care of them. We're going to go get those big fish over there. You don't need common sense. You just need to trust God. You have to learn how to really depend on God, listen for God. It's not your natural inclination, but 2 Corinthians 5:7 says, we walk by faith and not by sight. Are you part of that we? Yeah, we walk by faith and not by sight. And so when God told us to go to India, we said, okay. So, you know, I went and started telling a few friends we're going to move to India. They said they would help us, just like I told Pastor Willie, and the church started supporting us. And we got on an airplane. We flew to India. God was blessing it. It was amazing. When you're in the middle of God, it's crazy good. We were holding crusades. Some nights we'd have 10,000, some 50,000, a few 90,000 people, thousands of people getting born again. It was crazy good. 85, 86 were amazing. 87, we held a great crusade in a city. I mean, an amazing crusade, 90,000 people. One of the miracles that happened, it was a man there that was in his 40s, was born with no pupils in his eyes. He was blind, and God healed him, and he could see, but he still didn't have any pupils. And the whole town heard about this miracle. And everybody knew who this blind guy was. The whole place grew up. There's still a great church in Coimbatore, India, started from that crusade. Everything was going great. But you know, when we finished that crusade, we're staying in a very little, small, simple Hindu hotel. Hindu gods and idols everywhere. And we ran out of money. We just didn't have any money. I mean, we had zero money. No one had ever given us an offering in India. We paid for everything. We did everything. We had no money. On a Tuesday night, my wife looked at me and she said, Jack, we don't have any money to feed the kids breakfast in the morning. What are we going to do? Let me tell you, when you don't have money to feed your kids breakfast, and you're in a village in India, and they don't take any I didn't even have an American credit card. Maybe I had one American Express card. They don't take credit cards. I didn't know somebody to call and say, hey, Uncle Joe, can you send me $50? I called the guy in the States that got our mail and forwarded stuff to us. I said, I need money. I need it really bad. He said, you don't have any money. You're in debt $20,000. I said, what? He said, yeah, you owe for airplane tickets. You owe the travel agent. You owe the IRS. You owe this. You have $20,000 in either past due or due right now bills. And I kind of rhetorically said, what am I going to do? He said, Jack, just come home. People love you. Come home, tell people what's going on. People will give you money and you can go back. And I said, no. I'm not coming home. God told me to come over here. He didn't tell me to go home. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know, but I'm not coming home. So I told my wife, there's just no money. And she said, what are you going to do? I said, Sherry, we're just going to trust God. Look, we held each other. We're in one little hotel room, and we had our kids laid sideways on the bed like pieces of wood. And we put them to sleep. We stood there. We cried. We talked to God. I said, God, you owe me. Wrong. God doesn't owe us anything. We owe him everything. God, you have to help us. You have to do something. He had already done something. I just didn't know it. I was like, God, Something has to happen. So we decided we would send our 3 little girls to Youth with a Mission. Our friends ran Youth with a Mission, and they could stay there and have food to eat. And Sherry and I couldn't afford the hotel. We would just sleep on the street like millions of Indians do every night. And that's how we went to bed that night. The next morning when we got up, somebody knocked on our door. It was a pastor, Pastor Job Yanaprakasam. And he said, Pastor Jack, you preached in my church a couple weeks ago. I want to give you an offering. I said, how much is it, Pastor? And he gave me about $100. I said, thank you, Pastor. God bless you. You're beautiful. He left, and I told Sherry, there's money for breakfast. A few minutes later, our room didn't have a phone in it. They called me down to the lobby. Hey, you have a phone call. It was the National Director of Youth with a Mission. He said, hey, you spoke at our discipleship training school a few weeks ago. The students took an offering. They want to send it to you. I said, how much is it? He said, it's about $100. I said, send it immediately. I need it right away. From that Wednesday morning to that Friday morning, over $1,000 came in India. That was probably, I think, in October and November. By the next April, when we got on the plane to leave India, we had traveled all over the country holding great meetings, paid off the whole $20,000 that we were in debt, and had $3,500 in our hand. Do you know why? Because we trust God. And because when God tells us to do something, we don't change. Too many times when something happens, we don't understand, we start changing, we start shifting around. Look, when God tells you something, you just go do it. And nothing changes you. Nothing. If you don't have food to eat, nothing changes you. If you don't like what's going on, nothing changes you. I see people change churches. I'm like, why did you change churches? Well, do you know something happened over there? I said, did you not know that something happens at every church? It's an old joke. The guy was looking for the perfect church, and every church he went to, he would stay a little while, and then he'd find some problem. So one day somebody said, what's the deal with you going to all these churches? He said, every one of them's got problems. They go, yeah, well, as soon as you go there, that's the problem. You're the common denominator in every one of those churches. You don't change. If God told you to come to this church, hey, this is your church. You're just here. Well, what if something happens? I don't care. You just stay. What if I move? What if my job changes? If God don't tell you to change churches, you don't even move your house to another house unless God tells you. I see Christians all the time, I want to get a house over there. I want a better house. Well, maybe God needs you in the neighborhood you're in, and you didn't even know. He nudged you over to that place, and you're living there, and you're the brightest light in the neighborhood, and you want to move away and leave darkness there. So I might be serious about all this. What do you think? Trust God. We just trust God. How do we do 1 million souls? Trust God. Nobody ever thought, I couldn't even give an altar call and get one person saved in the U.S. 1 million to the Lord in Asia. Get 23,500 churches to plant a church. How do we do that? We just trust God. I don't know. We just kept doing it. One day, my phone rang on a Friday night in St. Louis. I was driving. I answered, and this guy said, Jack, this is Brother Floyd LaHan. So look, he's famous in the Church of God organization. And I never met him. He said, I know you never met me. I hope you don't mind. I got your number from a mutual friend. But the good Lord woke me up last night and told me to open the nation of Indonesia up for you. I said, really? I'm a skeptic. Really? Yeah, really. He said, so if you'll meet me in Surabaya, Indonesia, on this certain date in October, I'll do what the Lord told me to do. So I didn't know this guy, never met him. He is a famous man of God, a great prophetic voice. Never met him, so I said, well, Floyd, I've never talked to you before. I don't know you, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go talk to my wife about this, and then we're going to fast and pray for 7 days. And after 30 days, I'll let you know if I'm coming. No, I didn't do that. The man of God called and said, come to Indonesia. I said, I will be there. Look, when the man of God says go, you go. Well, thank you for all of those amens. And hallelujah, Brother Jack. Yeah, when the man of God tells you to do something, you just go do it. Well, what if the man of God's wrong? Then it's on him. It's not on you because you were obedient. What if the man of God is right? So you know what I did? I went to Surabaya, Indonesia, took a couple of buddies with me. I landed there, walked out of the airport. Actually, I went to Jakarta first. I walked out of the airport. There was a guy standing there holding a sign that said Reverend Jack Harris on it. Great, I never had that before. I walked over there, shook his hand, said, I'm Jack Harris. He said, well, I'm Pastor Sohan Doko. I said, Sohan Doko, are you not the bishop of the Churches of God of Indonesia? He said, I am. I said, how many churches do you oversee? He said, 3,500. I said, I'm kind of surprised you're here holding the sign. He said, I've never held the sign before. I said, why are you holding the sign today, Pastor? He said, because Jack Harris came to Indonesia. Oh, yeah. So he fed me a meal. We got on a plane, went to Surabaya, took me into a little private room in a JW Marriott hotel. I didn't even go to my room. Had traveled for 30 hours to get there. Went straight into the room, and I sit down with Pastor Alex Tandrapucha, pastors the Surabaya GBI Church of Indonesia, 125,000 members. Pastor Timothy Arifins pastors in Bali, a church that has tens of thousands. And Pastor Sohan Doko, who oversees 3,500 churches, and Floyd Lahan. I met Floyd. We sit there and talk for hours. They said, tomorrow we're going to 5 services. How many do you want to preach? I said, I'm not preaching any of them. No, we want you to preach. I said, no, I'm not preaching. They said, why? I said, I didn't come here to preach. Brother Floyd invited me here. I just came to meet you gentlemen. They couldn't understand that, and neither could I, but I didn't know everybody in the world wants to go preach a 125,000 member church. They had a 20,000 seat domed auditorium. Everybody wants to go there and preach. It intrigued them that I said no. Every service the next day, they would say, please, Jack, you preach this time. I said, no, I'm not preaching. So I was there. I got there Saturday night. We got on a plane Monday morning. We came home. I thought, well, that was great. I guess God opened Indonesia for me. But they did make me promise to come back. So I went back, took my wife, took teams with me, went back on over. I was like, wow. This is great. Indonesia, 3,500 churches. I can preach anywhere I want to. I can go to Bali and preach. How many like to go to Bali and preach? Hey. I thought that was it. But then, in December 26th of 2004, a tsunami took place right off the coast of Indonesia, and it hit the west coast of North Sumatra, and it killed 165,000 people in 2 waves in 2 minutes. And I said, Sherry, I have to go there. This is our part of the world. So I called Alex Tandrapucha. I said, Pastor Alex, I want to go to Banda Aceh. He said, well, it's a very remote place, but if you call this guy Bamban Yonan, which I kind of like those names, Alex Tandrapucha, Bamban Yonan, Timothy Arifins. He said, if you call, he'll take care of you. Let me call him and then you call. So I called, said, Pastor Bonbon, I want to come and I want to help. He said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do what you want to do. He said, okay, come. I'll see if we can find a hotel or someplace for you to stay. I said, nope, don't do anything. Don't find a place for me to stay. Don't do anything. I'll send you our travel arrangements, and I'll see you at whatever time you tell me on the day we arrive. So we went there. And that week before I left, I made 500 phone calls. One of the calls I made was to Pastor Willie George. I said, Pastor Willie, I know you've probably already done something to help the tsunami people, but I'm going to go to Banda Aceh, and if you wanted to help me, I could really appreciate that. He said, the Lord just spoke to me a couple of days ago about giving you $50,000, so we'll send you $50,000 next week. I said, awesome. A little while later, he called back. The next day, he called back and said, hey, I just want to let you know I sent $80,000, and I sent it yesterday. When I showed up in Banda Aceh, I had $250,000 and $100 bills. You can't use credit cards in a disaster zone, by the way. When I got there, cash is king in a disaster zone. I would go meet with this pastor 5 a.m. in the morning, and we were planning 3 days ahead, and we're going to do this. One of the first things we did, we're going to do 3,500 boxes that have everything a person needs to live for 1 week: water, vitamins, underwear, all kinds of stuff. There were boxes for men, some for women, some for children. He mobilized his whole church. His church was about 20,000 members. They made the whole big auditorium a lot bigger than this. They were packing and sorting and doing stuff. And I had caravans of trucks going all over the place. And I had 3 guys with me. 2 would leave every morning in a Missionary Aviation Fellowship airplane and fly to locations for distribution. We had rented a helicopter. Me and the other guy would get in the helicopter and fly to locations. And we were just doing everything. Actually, over about a 3-month period, we distributed millions of dollars worth of aid to Indonesians. There were only 2 rules. Number 1, I couldn't preach, and number 2, I couldn't carry a Bible. So I'm fine with that because my life is the message. The aid I give is the message. So one day we're in the helicopter and we're flying into Banda Aceh, and the pilot doesn't speak much English. He goes, So we can't land. The president of Indonesia is there. We're going to land somewhere else. Where? And I said, I don't care. Go wherever you want. So he goes over this mountain and he lands, and we get out, and there was a city there of 22,000 people. And when the tsunami blew through, there were 2,000 living. And it was devastation. So we land the helicopter. It's in the tropics. It's probably at least 100 degrees. It's hot in the helicopter. Me and the guy with me, Steve Smith, Sherry's brother who works with us, we're just standing there waiting. Two young guys walk up to us. And they go, hey, are you Jack Harris? I'm like, how do you know that I'm Jack Harris in this village in North Sumatra? And they said, oh, our pastor, Bamban Yonan, told us you were coming here tomorrow, but you might get here today, so he wanted us to be here to meet you. I said, how did you get here? They said, we walked over that mountain. I said, you climbed that mountain? Oh, yeah, we climbed the mountain. And we brought 2 boxes of aid in case you wanted to ceremonially present it to people, and tomorrow the ship will come with aid for everybody. I was like, wow, Floyd opened Indonesia up to me. So a man comes walking up to me, and he says, I'm the Pakachi, I'm the mayor of this town. And this is the holiest day of the year for Muslims, and we're having a service over there. There's about 80 to 100 people. Would you like to come and greet them? I heard that you're bringing aid tomorrow. I said, yeah, I want to greet them. So I walked over there. Remember, Jack, you can't preach. Don't start preaching to those people. So I go up there with a pretty good translator, and there was a little crowd. I mean, like this section right here. And there were a couple of guys right over here that had a little camera. A couple of guys over here had a little camera. And I stand up there and say, look, my name is Jack Harris. I'm an American. I'm from the United States. Americans are brokenhearted about what's happened to your country. Americans are weeping with you. We're crying for you. I told some of my Christian friends in America I'm going to go. They gave me money. Tomorrow a ship's going to come around that bend right there. They'll have everything you guys need to leave for a month. A generator will come. We'll help you with some building materials or whatever. I just want to say God bless you. America loves you. Went on about my business, got in the helicopter, went doing distributions everywhere. That night I got to my hotel about 9:30 or 10 o'clock. At 10:30, Pastor Bonbon calls me. He goes, Jack, do you know what happened today? I said, no, I don't know what happened. What happened, Pastor? He said, did you go to this little village? I said, I did. Then he said, did you stand up in front of the people? I said, I did. I thought he was going to say, you didn't start preaching, did you? I was like, no, I didn't. Not me. I never preach. He said, so did you happen to see a TV camera on one side? I said, well, I saw these guys with a little camera. He said, those are really good digital cameras. And he said, those guys, 2 TV stations representing the ABC and the CBS of Indonesia. And they showed on nationwide television tonight, you standing there saying, Americans love you. Americans are praying for you. He said, Jack, you preach the gospel to the nation today. You know why? Because I trust God. I would have never been there if I hadn't have said yes when the man of God called me. I would have never been there if I wouldn't have traveled there just to see what it was like. I've been back there many times since then. That church now has 120,000 members. They're building an auditorium that has a 15,000-seat dome auditorium with 15,000 seats underneath it. They call me Pastor Jack there. When I'm there, I meet with their elders and their leaders, and we dream and we plan, and I develop plans with them for unreached people groups in Indonesia. You know why all that happened? Because we trust God. Why did we do all the things we've done in India and Malaysia and Singapore and Vietnam and Thailand and Spain and Costa Rica and Brazil and Guatemala and Sweden? And it goes on and on. How do we do all that? We trust God. Can you trust God? Can you trust God? The first question, can you trust God? The second big question, can God trust you? Can God trust you? There's a lot more things I could say, but I want to close by saying this. Would you say you were looking at your notes? I got to have notes. That wasn't the end of my story, and this is not the end of your story. I don't know what else God has for you, but if God ever spoke to you, start doing what he said, even if it was a long time ago. You know, he doesn't need to tell you what to do next until you do what he told you to do first. What has God told you? What has God said to you? What has he said to you and your wife? Pursue those dreams. Pursue those things. Pastor Jack, that might cost me. It will cost you everything. It'll cost you everything. But you know what? when you're changing people's lives, when people are getting salvation, when people are getting hope, it's worth the sacrifice. It's worth the commitment. You will not be sorry. You will not be sorry. Can you really trust God? Can God trust you to be who he needs you to be? That's the question today. I believe God is speaking to people right now, and I'm going to pray for you. If you feel like God is speaking to you, just lift your hand up while I'm praying and receive this prayer. Can you do that? Let's just bow our heads. So God, we trust you, God. We want to hear your voice. We want to do your will. Help us to take great steps of faith and to say with our heart and to say with our lips, I trust you, God. God, there's people here, you've put amazing things in their heart. I'm asking to make all their dreams come true. And thank you for a great church like Church on the Move West that will encourage them, and help them make all those dreams come true. Thank you, Lord. Amen.